offense. Let's go.
A gorgeous morning here in Owings Mills, Maryland. Almost feels fall-like as we embark on day 2 of Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity. The second day of padded practices. These are live pictures of players loosening up here after day 1. All the excitement, some sore muscles as they get ready for day 2 of what is phase 3 of this training camp. Ronnie Stanley, the Pro Bowler, loosening up. Evan Washburn with you again alongside Ryan Mink with you for about 40 minutes here today. You want more Training Camp Live, we're going to give it to you. More live pictures today, less of our faces, but if we do go to our faces or to any video or graphics, it's probably just because they're going into some team periods and we can't show that. So Ryan Mink, we were out here for all of day 1, watched some of the team periods. Broad strokes, what stood out to you, my friend?
I think just the excitement level. I mean, you could tell how amped up these guys were to be in a real training camp padded practice. I mean, for 90 minutes yesterday, it really felt like normal. And that's really a change given all the COVID offseason and everything that's been going on in everybody's lives and these players' lives and how much it's impacted. I mean, the masks come off, you know, they can get as close as they want to their teammates. They can play real football, you know, not a game, but as close to it as we can come. I think it was just a relief for everybody after all that we've gone through this offseason to really feel like, hey, this is training camp. This is what we felt in years past.
Absolutely. The energy yesterday and even early today is to see the players working through the morning. A lot of discussions, a lot of laughter, and then it gets serious and competitive. As we mentioned yesterday, this show is about you, the fans, and giving you a sense of what's happening here, but we want it to be interactive. So head to Facebook and enter your questions into the comment section, and we'll get to those questions later in the show. Also, on Twitter, the poll question is up. You get to produce portions of the show, and today the question is, what Pro Bowler do you want us to focus on during the individual drills? And as you can see, the options: Mark Ingram, Mark Andrews, Marlon Humphrey, and Ronnie Stanley. And Ryan Mink, Marlon Humphrey edging out Mark Andrews and Mark Ingram, a D guy getting the love early on the poll.
Well, I guess some things never change, right? Baltimore loves defense. So Marlon Humphrey's an entertaining guy. I like it.
I'm sure if we told Mark Ingram right there that he was falling behind in the polls, he'd have something for the fans, because no doubt he's a fan favorite. And look, as these guys are working through stretching, such a critical part of the pre-practice regime, because yesterday was as physical as probably they've been in maybe 7 months. And we're going to get to some news across this team and really what is the picture of the league right now when it comes to injuries. But Ryan, you've been around these training camps, as have I. Day 1, the energy is there because of the excitement. Day 2, day 3, this is when the grind starts to pick up and the physicality will increase.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this year is unique because, like you said, this is really the first action that they've had. I mean, now they had a ramp-up period, and that helped somewhat. But I'm sure after the intensity of yesterday's practice that they're feeling a little bit more this morning. Now, I wouldn't say we're in the dog days yet, and it feels way too nice out here to be considered the dog days.
The humidity is gone from Maryland. And Ryan, should be noted, good to see, middle of your picture, your screen there, Brandon Williams, 98 in white. He was not a part of practice yesterday. John Harbaugh not really giving much clarity, but obviously nothing serious. When you've got these vets across that front, great look there of Derek Wolfe, Calais Campbell, and Brandon Williams. You got to manage their reps, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think John Harbaugh has always done an excellent job of that. Now, you need to get these guys ready, and in the beginning, I think the veterans will be practicing a lot. But as we get later in the training camp, yeah, they'll be taking some days off, I'm sure. Brandon, though, he was funny, you know, because he said, I can't wait to get to these padded practices because I've been hearing some talk about these young players, and I want to see what they got. So yesterday when he wasn't there, I was like, oh, man, Brandon's not going to see. But now back, so that's good.
And Mink, that's maybe the smart work here by a vet and Brandon Williams. Let these rookies get out all that energy day 1, and he takes advantage on day 2. I mentioned it. Now we're back on camera. That means we're going to go to an install period here on the field, so we won't be showing you that, but it's a good time to get to some news because we did learn some things yesterday from the press conferences, specifically John Harbaugh's on the injury front, and we start with Amman Marshall and Chris Moore, Ryan. A serious injury for Amman Marshall, a knee injury. He'll be out for the season. And Chris Moore, a key part of special teams, that wide receiver depth, he's dealing with a broken hand.
Yeah, well, you really feel for Amman. I mean, here's a guy who played 3 games last year as a rookie because of a hamstring injury suffered early, really put him on IR for most of the season. So now to have another injury that knocks him out for this season, I mean, really a tough start to his young career. He was a 4th-round pick out of USC that I really liked in training camp last year, just a physical kind of player. And he had a chance to compete for a roster spot in this crowded secondary, but you really feel for him because it's a setback for him early. But, you know, he'll have time to come back in his 3rd season, so we'll be looking out for that. And then Chris Moore, you know, a broken hand, a broken finger. It's the 2nd straight year that that's happened to him. Probably knocks him out for several weeks, and you know that makes things a little trickier at the back end of the wide receiver depth chart. Can somebody like Jaleel Scott swoop in and take a roster spot there? So 2 injuries, neither to starters, but serious injuries and something to watch out for 2 role players.
And Ryan, let's acknowledge Amman Marshall's tweet here from yesterday. Can't dwell on what already happened, just have to keep pushing with God and faith by my side. So positivity from Amman Marshall, and we're thinking of him. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery. There were some big plays made out on the field here yesterday after we got off the air, so let's show you some of those. And we have to start with the one Lamar Jackson. It's our top play presented by Oakley. Ryan, a deep ball, which I know is a big storyline, to Willie Snead.
Yeah. This is going to be talked about a lot this season because I think Lamar Jackson wants to really air it out. And, you know, all the chatter all offseason was, what's the next step for Lamar Jackson? You know, after you're coming off an MVP season, an unreal season like he has, what more can you do? That's the question. And Lamar, you know, is specifically pointed to that deep ball. He thinks that if he can hit those with more consistency, then this offense takes another step because he was so good over the middle of the field, intermediate passing, those kind of things, and obviously the running game. But if he can stretch defenses more vertically, that opens everything else up for this offense. So you saw yesterday, even if Lamar had to hold the ball just a half a second longer to look deep, he was willing to do so. And let's not forget the connection to Hollywood Brown. That connection is one to look out for this year. There it is right on screen.
Yeah, those two, no doubt, have a chemistry that goes beyond just a few years here in Baltimore. Mark Andrews in there as well. But yesterday, we really focused, for good reason, on the rookies and the top 2 picks, Patrick Queen and J.K. Dobbins. And Patrick Queen immediately making an impact here, attacking the sled. But one of my favorite drills every training camp, the individual linebackers, running backs, Queen attacking J.K. Dobbins. Here's Gus Edwards. But Patrick Queen, despite the fact that he may have poked some fun at his doubters on social media, made an immediate impact to everybody here in Owings Mills yesterday, Ron.
Yeah, well, it's one of your favorite drills to watch and probably one of the running backs' least favorite drills, especially when Patrick Queen's coming at you. So, yeah, I mean, life is all about first impressions, right? Well, Patrick Queen in the first team drills knifed through the line and made a tackle in the backfield for the first tackle of padded training camp. So that's a good first impression for Patrick Queen. I mean, here's an athletic guy out of LSU who's going to go 100 miles per hour at all times. And like I said yesterday, it's okay if he makes some mistakes. That's going to happen. That's what happens when a rookie is plugged into the middle of your defense week 1. But I think we see that he has the athleticism to make some plays in this defense, and that really kind of popped even in that first practice. You see how well he moves.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's the tweet, doubt me, from Patrick Queen. And our friend Pete Gilbert from WBL saying, nah, I watched practice. Well said. Pete Gilbert actually being efficient with his words there. Well done, Pete. We're just getting rolling here on Training Camp Live presented by Xfinity. Again, they're in some installs right now, but we're going to get to individual drills here out of the next break. We've also got a real treat here in show number 2. Lamar Jackson was wired yesterday, and we'll show you some of that. So stay with us here on Training Camp Live.
Feel like you've watched all the things? Now there's more to love with Xfinity X1, the ultimate entertainment experience. Like live sports, they're back with the best way to watch. And more streaming apps all in one place. More classics, more premieres, plus more to easily find using just your voice. Hello, more. Where have you been all my life?
Get this offer now with DVR service included for a year. Plus, get speed, coverage, and security with the X-Fi Gateway. Click, call, or visit a store today.
If the last few months have taught us anything, it's that we really, really miss football. It's coming, and Ravens scratch-offs from the Maryland Lottery are already here. Play now for a chance to win up to $100,000 or second chance cash and Ravens prizes like seats for 20 years. Please play safely and responsibly.
This right here is the papadilla, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Latin for better than a sandwich. Even has a better pickle. Papadilla for just $6. Better ingredients, better pizza, better than a sandwich. Papa John's.
At MedStar Health, your safety is always our top priority. That's why we're taking extra precautions so you can trust us to treat you safely. Visit medstarhealth.com/safe to learn more. MedStar Health, it's how we treat people. We promised it. Time to get into the individual drills and what to watch for. And Ryan, we start in the new look defensive line group. And Calais Campbell right in the middle of your screen there, just dwarfing most of the large men that make up that unit. But Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams back out on the practice field, and some of the younger guys that are going to add depth to a group that I don't want to say is going to be different this season, but I do think there's some expectations that they're going to be even more dynamic. And I should mention Matthew Judon, who made a bunch of plays yesterday and was at the podium and had some fun with the media and seems energized here on that franchise tag.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this defensive line has been totally transformed. I think that's the biggest upgrade the Ravens made this offseason. I mean, Calais Campbell, obviously, his resume speaks for itself. One of the best run stoppers and pass rushers among defensive linemen in the league. You know, it's funny, he was walking out to practice and he was walking next to Jimmy Smith. And yesterday I commented, I said, I think Jimmy Smith has really kind of slimmed down a little bit. He looks a little smaller. And then I was like, oh, wait, you know, it's just in comparison to Calais Campbell. Everybody's on a sliding scale now.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And Jimmy Smith's about 6'2", 6'3". I mean, he's known for his length. I thought it was they signed a new slot corner that was wearing the deuce.
Exactly. You have to judge everybody on a scale now when Calais is around it. The rest of your team just looks smaller. But, I mean, yeah, with his arrival and then also Derek Wolfe, I think the Ravens have two. I mean, Brandon Williams called them the twin towers beside him. And this defensive line can really kind of be stout against the run, which was an area, a little bit of weakness in some games last year, and just get after pass rushers. I mean, Wink Martindale last year blitzed more than any other defensive coordinator in the league, and it wasn't really close. And he brought pressure from every single angle. That's not going to change. Wink likes to blitz. He likes to bring pressure. But now with those guys up front, I think he can do a little bit less of that, drop a little bit more into coverage, and I think that obviously you're going to win more one-on-one battles up front. More guys are going to come clean to that quarterback, so it makes a big difference. I think there's a ripple effect from bringing Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe onto this team on the defensive line.
Absolutely. It allows you to probably dive into some different areas of that defensive playbook. Should mention defensive line coach Joe Cullen there in the middle of your screen with the mask on, 14 years, just one of the most respected defensive coaches around the league and just one of the great personalities and an energizing factor on this coaching staff. And he gets that defensive line group going, even though right now they're just doing a lot of standing around listening at this point. We saw a shot there of the offensive line, Ryan, and I know we mentioned it yesterday. It's going to be a topic all training camp. Who's going to step in at right guard for Marshall Yanda? And DJ Fluker, Ben Powers are the two names. But as we now shift our focus to the offensive line here in the individual drills, DJ Fluker appeared to be the guy out of the gate there at that right guard position, but Ben Powers and then a number of other young players working as well through these early portion of the padded practices, which I think for the offensive line are as critical as any position group to just gain chemistry here over the course of what's really only about 14 practices, 17 to 20 days, 25 days until week one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the loss of Marshall Yanda, obviously, that's an enormous loss for this offensive line. It was funny. I was talking to Matt Skur a month ago for our podcast, The Lounge, and he said even when he filled in for Marshall, when Marshall suffered that, I think it was an broken ankle injury a couple years ago, and he said it was funny, you'd be watching film, and you could do a backflip and then block somebody, and they'd be like, well, Marshall did a double backflip, So, nobody ever can measure up to Marshall Yanda.
Yeah, there's no replacing Marshall Yanda, but somebody's going to play right guard week 1.
Exactly. You can't just go without a right guard. So I think that DJ Fluker yesterday, my first impressions is obviously physically he's huge. And then second, I saw him with some pretty nice one-on-one blocks, one on the rookie Justin Madubuike. So I think that DJ Fluker fits what the Ravens want to do really well. Here's a power downhill blocker. You talk about size and physicality. You put him next to Orlando Brown, I feel bad for defensive linemen lining up on that side of the field. So here's an experienced guy. He's worked with Joe D'Alessandris before. I think that he has to just get comfortable with this Ravens scheme and all that this is going to be asked of him, whether it's, pooling and different things in this scheme, because we all know that Greg Roman is very dynamic in his run game. So if he can get up to speed, I think that he has a very good shot to be the week 1 starter. But there's going to be competition. Like we said, Ben Powers, here's a guy who's had a year in the Ravens system, a 4th-round pick out of Oklahoma. We saw what Bradley Bozeman did last year. The Ravens like to groom these kind of mid-round offensive linemen. How many have we seen? Rick Wagner, back in the day. We've seen them groom these guys into quality starters. Ben Powers could be the next. Then you have a couple of rookies in Tyree Phillips, kind of big, physical, a little bit more of a raw guy out of Mississippi State, but he's got all the potential in the world. And Ben Bredesen, who's just a no-nonsense, physical guy out of Michigan. So there's a lot of talent that's going to be cycled through that right guard position, and may the best man win.
All right, we call it Nat Sound in the business, Ryan, and you're a good talker, but it's time for us to just listen to these large men attack this sled, because these are training camp sights and sounds. We'll give this about 10, 15, 20 seconds. If you tried to walk up to that thing right now and lift it probably half its actual length there, Ryan, we would fall down, and those dudes just tossed it to the side. So again, that's one of the staples of training camp. Yeah. That sound of the sled.
That's honestly what I was thinking too. I was like, if I hit that thing, it sounds like a bink. You could hear a pin drop. When I hit the sled.
No, I think that the sound would be you hitting the ground. So as we shift to the man of every hour, there's Lamar Jackson next to Robert Griffin III. They got some work in. We showed the highlights, Ryan, but as you charted and worked through yesterday's practice, as Lamar enters year 3 here, I think beyond the deep ball and beyond the numbers and matching everything that made up 2019, the word I keep going back to is command and comfort. Actually, that's 2 words. And I really sense that from watching him practice and his approach. And despite not having OTAs in minicamp, there just seems to be a comfort with everything around them, the infrastructure, but most importantly with what they want to do offensively.
Yeah, I think for sure. Lamar's always been a guy that has a lot of fun playing this game, and you could see that yesterday. When we had him mic'd up, he's joking the whole time and pointing to defenders that he basically broke their ankles on long runs. And, the guy, he's dancing around throughout the whole practice. He's always having fun, but I agree with you. I think just his comfort level in this offense. Last year, being his first year as a starter, there was a lot on his shoulders, and there still is. Make no doubt about that. But he had a full offseason to really dig into those things, kind of look at how he's reading defenses, and it's just another year under your belt. You have to remember how young Lamar Jackson is. He's 23? This is a young player who's just really starting to kind of scratch the surface of what he can be long term. And what we've already seen is really awesome. So you see him, and his teammates just love him. I thought it was funny yesterday, just talking to Matthew Judon. I asked him, I said, how does it feel out there on the field knowing, hey, you're the franchise player, you're the franchise tag player, you got that tag, and what does that feel like on your shoulders? He said, yeah, I got the franchise tag, but I'm not the franchise player of this team. We all know who the franchise is, and that's Lamar Jackson. So you definitely see that, and just his teammates kind of They always want to be around him because he's a fun guy and he's so confident and he knows what he's doing out there.
There's an urgency to what Lamar Jackson and this entire offense and this team are bringing to this training camp here at day 2 of the Phase 3, the padded practices. And we mentioned Lamar Jackson had a wire on for us yesterday. You'll enjoy some of those sights and sounds coming up after the break here on Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity.
Wawa Hoagies are a winning pick for game day. Every hoagie's made with the ingredients you crave in varieties you love. From toasty cheesesteak to mouthwatering meatball, Italian, and more, there's a hoagie for every mood and every appetite. Stop in, order ahead with the Wawa mobile app, or get it delivered. When you're planning for the game, we have you covered with Wawa Catering. Make your game day a winner with Wawa Hoagies snacks and drinks. Wawa is the official hoagie of the Baltimore Ravens. Gotta have a Wawa.
You can see it in the eyes of every Ravens fan. An unwavering commitment to the team they love. A pride so vibrant, it can be seen from miles away. A community that's fully committed to their team and shows up week after week to help chase a championship. To the Ravens flock, to Chet starters, to those who bleed purple, M&T Bank wants to say, we're your biggest fan.
No, this ain't no sandwich, because on a sandwich, they ask you if you want cheese. But on a papadilla, cheese is what's holding the whole operation together. Get one now for just $6. Better ingredients, better pizza, better than a sandwich. Papa John's.
Welcome back, Training Camp Live, presented by Xfinity. If you haven't heard of it, I don't know where you've been. The Lounge Podcast, changing the podcast game. So, Ryan Mink, you, along with Garrett Downing, the voice of this content generator, what should we expect on the Lounge here in the coming days and weeks?
Well, the Lounge is just fun. I mean, we call it the Lounge because Garrett and I shared an office for forever. We still do. And we would always call it the Lounge. And so people would just pop in and we'd just kind of talk football, talk Ravens, talk a whole bunch of stuff. So that's kind of what the podcast is. You know, we have a lot of fun talking on there about Ravens, and we have silly drafts, about Netflix drafts and bunker drafts and all kinds of different things. And primarily what we're doing is we're talking to the players. And we bring on a player or somebody related to this team almost every episode. This week we had Miles Boykin, that's coming out. Last week we had Lamar Jackson. So, you know, it's a different kind of conversation. You know, you often get these interviews and they're 5-minute interviews or conference calls or whatever, and it's just bing, 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 hit the news a day. But we like to have some fun with the player and get to know them a little bit better as a person, not just a player.
Well, the Lounge is dry, but the banter is not. Did you come up with that tagline?
I don't think I came up with that, but it's really good.
It
really
is.
Good.
It really paints a picture.
I think that's
of what
Michelle
I
Andres.
I've only been on the Lounge once, Ryan, so I don't know if that's a badge of honor or not, but I feel like I should get another invite at some point. We mentioned it. This is an interactive show on Facebook. In the comments section, you pose your questions, and we will do our best to answer them. And first up, from Lisa Frankel. Hi, everyone. How do you think, or who do you think has the shot of being the Ravens' Rookie of the Year, and why? So basically, Rookie of the Year here out of this class of draft picks and undrafted guys, Ryan. Who's front of mind for you?
Well, I got to point to Patrick Queen. I mean, he's going to be in that starting position, I think, week 1. And being in the middle of the Ravens defense, there's going to be a lot of eyes on him, right? I mean, some of this is just how much attention can you get, not just how well do you play. And I think, obviously, following in the legacy of other first-round inside linebackers drafted by the Ravens, Ray Lewis and C.J. Mosley, those are two great examples for him to follow. Patrick Queen gets in there and makes a big difference week 1 for this defense, and I think this defense could be the talk of the town this season. I would not be surprised if this defense, it could be number 1 in the league, and I don't think that's really looking through 2 rose-colored glasses. That's not too optimistic. It could definitely be number 1, and if Patrick Queen is a big reason for that, if he gets some sacks, some turnovers, some, you know, a lot of tackles, obviously, he could definitely be in that Rookie of the Year conversation.
And he's going to benefit from these guys up front. Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe. We've spent a lot of time with this defensive line group today, and we will over the next few days because, as you mentioned, Ryan, this defense, which was top 5 and one of the best in the league last year, only got better by the additions they made in free agency, and you would think through the draft with a guy like Patrick Queen. So here we see the defensive line working through their individual groups in the Twitter poll, and Marlon Humphrey able to hold on, edging out Mark Andrews and Mark Ingram. And look, Ronnie Stanley, it's tough to get some love at the O-line position, but we listen to you. You produce the show. So here's a chance to look at Marlon Humphrey, who's now a Pro Bowler and considered one of the best corners, cover corners in the league. His ability, Ryan, from my perspective, to attack the ball as a tackler, not just in coverage, but when that guy's got the ball. He dislodged so many critical forced fumbles last year, and now he enters this season along with the rest of that secondary as really the anchor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Marlon Humphrey, I think last year the question was, all right, can you prove to be one of the elite corners in the NFL? He absolutely did that. I mean, he's kind of like a linebacker playing corner. The way he attacks ball carriers and wide receivers, obviously has all the speed and athleticism to hang with anybody on the outside. So here's a player who's really just becoming one of the top 3 guys in the league. And it was interesting talking to him yesterday. I mean, he said, what's next for me is winning a championship. You look back at it, Alabama. He's used to winning a lot and winning those championships. And he went down to the Super Bowl last year, was actually on the field in Miami, and said that kind of motivated him this offseason, just seeing all that and kind of how those players felt down there. So he attacked it this offseason from a training perspective, did some track workouts. He has a track background. Did you see, Evan, the rock pile at the quarry that he went up?
I went and looked at it after that comment was made during the press conference, and it made me think there's a show to either have been made or be made over the course of the next few months here, just what these guys were able to do in terms of home workouts. Look, they were able to, at times, get to private gyms or get equipment, but the creativity shown by Marlon Humphrey and a number of guys to get that work in was impressive.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, it looked like a 2-story hill. I think Marlon Humphrey is in phenomenal shape, and really, you look at the Ravens cornerbacks. I mean, Marcus Peters, and then Marlon Humphrey, Tavon Young. When Jimmy Smith is your 4th corner, you know you're doing something right. I mean, Tavon Young, too, let's pay a little attention to him. His return just makes this whole group better, because here's one of the top slot cornerbacks in the NFL. The Ravens have signed him to an extension. When you plug him back in the nickel, now Marlon can play outside, because let's not forget, Marlon was kind of playing out of position to a degree last year. He was playing in the slot out of necessity and just to get the best cornerbacks on the field. But now you put Tavon back in there, he's another playmaker, just like Marcus Peters, like Marlon Humphrey. I mean, this group really kind of, I think, is the best secondary in the league.
And I think that leads us perfectly to another question here from one of our fans on Facebook, Austin Shoup. With the Amman injury placed on IR, Amman Marshall, we mentioned it off the top of the show with the knee injury, what will the Ravens do to address that depth at corner? So, Ryan, I would pivot to you and say, do they need to address the depth, or is the depth provided via who they have in the bottom half of that 2 deep, or with what they've picked up in the draft? But I do think it's important to continue to acknowledge that depth, and while your top 5, your top 6 can be great, you need to have guys ready to go, whether it be via injury or some of the other things and logistical challenges that will be created here in this different 2020 season.
Yeah, I think cornerback was one of the team's deepest positions, so I don't think you have a huge depth problem right there. I mean, Amman was competing with Anthony Averett, I think, for really the 5th cornerback spot on this team. Now, with that said, you never want to be short at cornerback. And the Ravens went through that some years, and Eric DeCosta has vowed to never let that happen again. So it wouldn't surprise me if they look out at what's on the market, or, look at some of these kind of rookies that are out there, these undrafted rookies, and maybe one of those guys can plug in. So I think Josh Nurse, there's an undrafted rookie right there. They have some young talent here that they can kind of groom and see what those guys have before they have to pull the trigger, because it's not like you lost a starter or even necessarily one of your top backups, because Anthony Averett, there's another 4th-round pick out of Alabama who hasn't gotten many opportunities. Now he gets more of a chance. So I don't think the Ravens have a huge problem at cornerback.
Jesse Minter, the coach there, working with the defensive backs and the wide receivers. Jane Prochet, we saw him out of the gate here. First guy on the practice field the last couple days. Thought of in that punt return, kick return game, but could be a factor as a pass catcher as well. Willie Snead made a difference and made some impact in practice, and Miles Boykin with an unfortunate drop here as we move to the wide receiver group. But the headliner has to be Marquis Brown. Ryan, just based off of the offseason, the fact that he's healthy, he's been the talk of a lot of guys within that locker room about how he's looked early as we now address the depth within this wide receiving core. And this is a time to probably acknowledge that there are reports out there about Dez Bryant coming in for a workout as well.
Yeah, very interesting reports. I mean, let's first look at the guys that we have here right now. I mean, it's an unproven group. I mean, you have 4 of those players that we're seeing on screen there are second-year players. And really, Marquis Brown is the only one who got a lot of run time last year. I mean, Miles Boykin played a fair amount, but he wasn't high on the target chart right there. So Marquis Brown is, I think, going to become a very good elite wide receiver in this league. Would not surprise me at all if he goes over 1,000. He's going to be making a lot of those big plays that we were talking about earlier this year. I mean, his physical transformation this offseason has been incredible. Last year when he came in as a rookie, I think anybody would tell you, you lay eyes on him, you're like, whoa, this guy is small. I mean, he was a $175. I weigh more than
Marquis Brown. And that's coming from Ryan Mink, who we addressed yesterday, has shrunk in all the wrong ways during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it was last year. You definitely were like, wow, can this guy hold up? And you know, other than his foot, he did. You know, so I think this year the added muscle and everything, and obviously his foot feeling healthier, that's the biggest difference. But then the added muscle and all that, I think Marquis Brown is primed to have a breakout season for this team. The biggest question is, who's it going to be opposite him? And Miles Boykin is a player with all the talent. I mean, here's a guy who blew up the combine a year ago, and now he just needs to become more consistent. So, you know, he made some plays last year, had a few touchdowns, and he's a chain mover. You know, he's a chain mover that can also threaten you over the top with his speed, but it's a big-bodied wide receiver that the Ravens want to see. Can he make plays consistently enough? You know, does he know his assignments consistently enough? He focused on that, I think, a lot this offseason, and it's just becoming more comfortable in this offense. So he's going to get his opportunities, but like you mentioned, you know, there's reports out there about Dez Bryant and bringing in a veteran who could probably step in there and be a game changer right away too.
And Ryan, before we get to the Dez Bryant reports, I do think we should acknowledge Devin Duvernay. I mean, he's the highest drafted wide receiver of this year's class. He should be factored into the discussion of that second or that other outside receiver with Miles Boykin, because you think that Willie Snead in a lot of ways has that slot position, I don't want to say locked up, but he just provides so much in terms of his ability to be a consistent blocker, which we know within this offense is so critical. But as you look at Duvernay there, 13 in the purple jersey, there's a lot of excitement about what he can bring in the big play capability that he showed at Texas and what is desired here by this staff and by this fan base here in Baltimore.
Absolutely. I think Willie Snead, you know what you have in Willie Snead. I mean, he's a reliable chain mover, great blocker, one of the better blocking wide receivers in the NFL. You know what you have there, but I think the Ravens wanted a little bit more speed in that slot, and that's what Devin Duvernay provides you. They can stretch that seam a little bit more along with Mark Andrews to really kind of, like I said at the top, stretch these defenses out a little bit more so they can't just focus so much on that run game and stack the box. So Duvernay puts a little bit more of a scare into opposing defenses. And here's another, you know, just sure-handed guy. I mean, you could count how many drops he had in college on one hand. So I think the Ravens can use him in a lot of different ways and really kind of scare opposing defenses a little bit more. And let's also not forget James Prochet. I mean, I know that his biggest competition right now is probably a punt returner, but you see him out here, first guy on the field. I think James Prochet he'll have some opportunities to make some plays on offense too. So Duvernay and Prochet, 2 rookies to keep an eye on for sure.
Before we jump over to that wide receiver crew, got a picture of the tight ends as well. I want to give a shout out. We saw the athletic trainers there giving some water. They're under unbelievable protocols in keeping everybody safe here. And one thing you could see there, Ryan, everyone gets individual bottled water there. No longer are you seeing everybody getting sprayed in the mouth with shared water bottles. Everybody's getting a little individual water bottle. So these are part of the new normals that will be training camp here in 2020, but we appreciate all the work they're doing as Lamar Jackson now getting some work with the running backs in the backfield, Justice Hill there, and then some passes out of the backfield to some of these guys. One-on-one drills here. This is a fun one with the linebackers.
This is a tough one for the linebackers.
We'll stick here and see how the coverage goes. We know that getting speed at that inside linebacker position, such a critical part of this defense, is something they're hoping that they gain with Queen and company.
Well, that was Malik Harrison there on Justice Hill, so that's a good one because Malik Harrison, I think he has some underrated athleticism. I mean, when the Ravens drafted him, people talked about, oh, well, here's your perfect complementary piece to Patrick Queen. Here's your downhill thumper. Well, let's not forget this is a former quarterback. So he's a guy who transferred positions at Ohio State, really became a linebacker. He's got a lot of athleticism. To see him work in coverage is interesting. Justice Hill is a tough assignment, though, one-on-one out of the backfield. So that's always an interesting drill. It's funny, Evan, you talk about how things have changed and the trainers in the water. Reporters, we're used to stand there, and sometimes, a pass sails over and it comes near your feet. Yesterday, one happened, and all the reporters and everybody else, our PR staff, start screaming, "Don't pick it up! Don't touch it!" You're so used to just tossing the ball back. So things are definitely a little bit different. As nice as it is to have football and that sense of normalcy, not completely normal.
No, not at all. But it gives these guys comfort, and that's what's most important, so that they can go out there and play free. As we look at Matthew Judon here, working against the heavy bags. And again, it's much like the sled. These guys make those pads look like the pillows that we throw around the bed. But those are some heavy, heavy pads. And this, to me, shows the athleticism required off the edge here, and a good look at how low they can get those hips down. You think of guys like Judon, but, I mean, the one name that always comes to mind, Von Miller, the bend that they have at their size and speed. They got to pick up that towel off the ground here. So Joe Cullen and his staff putting together a pretty cool drill here.
Yeah. There's an interesting player there, Jihad Ward. He's somebody that we probably haven't talked about enough. The Ravens re-signed him this year after picking him up mid-season last season. He's an interesting player. I mean, he can play with his hand in the dirt. He can stand up at times, too. Physical, gritty player, former second-round pick of the Indianapolis Colts. So he's a guy that I think is a key rotational piece for this defensive line that deserves a little bit more of attention. Just a worker. I mean, he can stuff the run. He'll probably put up 3 or 4 sacks. So I like Jihad Ward. He's a good quality player.
I'm glad you brought him up, Ryan, because he was somewhat lost in the shuffle of last year's work by Eric DeCosta and his group when they basically revamped that defense on the fly after the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And Jihad Ward really provided some depth, but some impact plays there over the course of that stretch where this team didn't lose any games, and that defense became one of the best in the NFL. And he's going to have his work cut out for him, too, to continue to find snaps here with that group. Here's J.K. Dobbins, and we mentioned Patrick Queen out of the gate, impressing those that were watching that maybe don't know as much as the coaching staff, but can tell when a good football player exists on the field. And here's a question that'll take us right there. From Facebook, again, the comment section is where you can place those questions. How do you envision the running backs splitting time? Will they have 4 active running backs each week? This is something I mentioned to you yesterday, Ryan. I mean, you look at this group, it's Justice Hill there, J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram, and the Gus Bus, who's not pictured as he runs through the picture. How do they work this? How do you envision it on a game day active roster situation?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they have 4 active running backs at all. I mean, I think each guy fills a little bit of a different need. And it obviously depends on special teams. I mean, you look at Justice Hill, he might be your kick returner this year. He could play a variety of roles on special teams. Gus Edwards, too. I mean, Gus Edwards is a big, physical, fast guy coming down the field on special teams, too. So I think it's going to be determined, but I would not be surprised if J.K. Dobbins ends up being the number 2 running back. I mean, we talked about Patrick Queen in the first impression with his quickness. Holy cow, J.K. Dobbins. The feet on this guy are incredible. I mean, everything he does just looks really fast, and I think the Ravens are going to be able to use him in a variety of roles, whether that's even if he splits out wide as a wide receiver, a bunch of different things. And, you just can't help but see some Ray Rice in him. And I don't think it's just the number 27 jersey. But looking at his game on the field, I mean, he just he reminds you of Ray, who was an unbelievable playmaker. So J.K. Dobbins, he can get to that edge fast and with some power. And I think that among those 4 running backs in that rotation, they're going to give him a pretty good look.
Really well put together on top of that speed and burst and the ability to make people miss. Well, as they now shift to the team period, it's time to enjoy Lamar Jackson wired from day one of padded practices yesterday.
Let's go, y'all. Let's go, fellas. Go ball, fellas. Go ball. Go. Good shot. Woo, he's back. I'm mic'd up too, fam. Yeah. Hey, I'm mic'd up. Let's get this dub today. Hey, Bobby, what they do? You good, coach? Yes, I'm good, coach. Shot. Appreciate that, brother. On the out, when you broke out on him, he pulled you. Yeah. That's why I ain't throw it yet, you feel me? I know. I thought he was gonna try to undercut it. I know. Yeah. And then he stayed behind you, then I threw it. I figured that's the same thing. Yeah, they like, I don't know why that's not a flag. Money shot! Hey, that was a touchdown? That was a touchdown, ain't it? Hey, they was dead though. I see them running full speed. Hey, they running full speed up there. I said, oh yeah, y'all dead.
I'll run with you.
Hey, I started laughing. I said, oh yeah, they dead. Cut me right back. I thought it was a touchdown, coach. Who caught me? Who touched me? I ain't gonna lie, I gotta start. I'm gonna break a lot of long ones this year.
MVP on the field, but that personality always puts a smile on your face. That'll do it for this edition of Training Camp Live presented by Xfinity. The team now is in team period, so we will say goodbye for now. But coming up around 10:45, John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, Marcus Peters, Earl Thomas, they will have their press conferences. You can stream them live right here. We're also going to have highlights and top plays from today's practices later today. And tomorrow, Calais Campbell wired for sound. So we'll be right back here about 9 a.m. Eastern for another edition of Training Camp Live presented by Xfinity. Have a great day, everybody.